When I was a teenager, I was pretty badly behaved. It was expected of me almost from birth. My name is Lola Rose Pearson, and my mother had me when she was 15. She couldn't handle looking after me and suffered from a serious cocaine addiction. To feed the addiction, she sold herself, and that was what eventually had me taken away from her and put into foster care. I was unlucky. Because they had taken me at 5 years old, I was too old for anybody to want to adopt, and I bounced between different group homes until I was 14. Around that time, I had started to really rebel. I skipped school all the time, never came home, took whatever drugs I could access to, and I made bad sexual decisions. I got involved with some older guys and I started helping them with breaking and entering. It turns out, most normal law-abiding people will speak to a young, homeless-looking girl for a while. Usually, just long enough for the guys to get in, take any small valuables and cash, and then get out. That was usually. We got caught on our 6th go-around. By that point, my description had been given numerous times. When I look back at those times, I can't believe I would have put somebody through that. The absolute terror of knowing somebody's been lurking in your house, the loss of sentimental items, and honest-earned cash. This, along with my previous cautions for drugs and antisocial behavior, earned me 6 months in a juvenile facility. I deserved it and I needed it. I was on the road to becoming an awful person very fast. I was already an awful person. I'm grateful for my time there because it really did change me. I got clean, caught up with my education, and I made some friends for life. The facility that I stayed in was super focused on rehabilitation, and for me, it really worked. I'm now 23 years old and a supervisor in a restaurant. I earn decent money, I have a beautiful girlfriend, and I live in a generally quiet life. Despite all the good things that mini prison did for me, there was a singular event during my stay that has haunted me for almost 10 years now. I've been thinking about it a lot recently, and it's starting to disrupt my relaxed existence. I wanted to tell someone about what had happened, and here is the only place that might understand. In the facility, we stayed in dormitory-style rooms with 6 girls to a room. I was on the left bottom bunk. The girl above me was called Georgia Tanner. Everybody just referred to her as George. She was the alpha of the room. The male name quite suited her intimidating demeanor. Jessa and Brianna lived on the middle bunks. Neither of them were particularly sociable. They were 17 and older than a lot of the girls there, and they just wanted to keep their head down and do their time. They knew if they ended up there again after they got out, it would be real prison. The last bunk belonged to Amber and Cleo. Amber was like George's number 2. She backed up anything my big, intimidating bunkmate said, and spoke constantly of what a great life she had at home, and how she didn't deserve this. She was in for joyriding her parents' Audi and crashing it into a tree. I found her incredibly annoying. Cleo was different from the others though. She was my favorite roommate. We got along instantly and really helped each other through our time there. She had a similar upbringing to me, flowing through the system after parental neglect. On the night of the incident, I was sat on Cleo's bunk with her before lights out, talking about life and how it was going to be different when we got out. The other girls in the room were all very typical, excited to get out and repeat the same shit that landed them here in the first place. But me and Cleo had dreams of university, careers, and families. It was about 20 minutes before the guards came round to do a final count and switch the lights off when we first heard the noise. It was a deafening scraping sound coming from the next room. like metal against a chalkboard but amplified to the level of a jackhammer. Every conversation going on in the room stopped. All 6 of us grabbed hold of our ears in pain. The noise only lasted for a few seconds, but it shook everyone up. We waited for some sort of announcement or to hear the alarm go off, but it never happened. We went back to conversation after a while. No one attempted an explanation for the noise. I don't think any of us even knew where to start. It wasn't much longer until the guard turned up to switch off the lights. The guard on duty was Turvy, an absolutely awful example of a human, and I've met many of those in my time. Turvy was fat, bald, and seemed to enjoy making every moment miserable. Most of the guards were okay, but he was a piece of work. "What was that noise, Turvy?" George asked bluntly. She was always the first. "It's Officer Turvy and it's none of your business," he practically spat back. "It is my business when it's making my freaking ears bleed, Turvy," she retorted, slightly more irritated than before. George was explosive when she got angry, one of the many reasons that she was here. But so was Turvy. "You see, a profanity and disrespected my authority all in one sentence, inmate. That's a strike instantly." After the unusual professionalisms, he murmured under his breath. We all heard it, but no one dared to say anything. Frickin' waste of air. We may not have dared to say anything, but he ignited a rage in George. Amber shot guilty glances across the room for not backing up her friend when she lashed a fist towards Turvy. Amber was such a coward. She looked even guiltier as Turvy grabbed George by the wrist and dragged her from the cell to time out. Timeout was rarely used in the facility, but George had visited timeouts more than 10 times in her 4 months here, usually because of Turvy. This was nothing new. As the cell door swung shut, the noise started again. The high-pitched, ear-piercing scrape. Except this time, it was much closer. And this time, it was followed by screams from George. We had never heard her distressed before. She seemed to me to have a very limited emotional range, and generally, it always went straight to angry. Hearing her scream like that shot a deep, thumping fear into all of our chests. As she screamed, we could hear crunching, like a louder, bigger version of leaves being stepped on in the autumn. The rustling sound that they make as they crumble to pieces. Cleo grabbed a hold of my hand. She was more sensitive than the rest of them. I felt like I needed to protect her, like she was my little sister or something, even though she was older than me. She squeezed my hand so tight my arm started to tingle, but I didn't care. It was the only comfort in that moment. The noises finally came to an end. The screaming and scraping stopped abruptly, leaving a heavy and uncomfortable few seconds of silence behind them. We heard clunking moving further away, and Amber got up and walked towards the tiny window on our door. Instantly, she recoiled and collapsed in on herself to vomit on the floor. Spittle touched the concrete in long strips coming from her mouth, and her usual composure and general aura of posh girl had completely disappeared. She was in too much of a state to articulate what she had seen. Brianna and Jesse were nearly catatonic, Brianna gently rocking, tears flowing down her face. Cleo was still attached to my hand. I had never seen fear like that up close. I wrenched her hand from mine and I stood up. Someone had to find out what was going on. As I reached the window, I immediately understood Amber's visceral reaction to the scene. There was George, her best friend, crumpled up on the floor just like the leaf I had thought of as I heard the noise. Her corpse laid out on the floor, bones broken and jutting from the skin in multiple directions. Blood carpeted the cemented hallway floor, and as my eyes followed the stream of red, it led me to Officer Turvy, in the same state as George. It seemed like whatever had done this to them took a particular disliking to Officer Turvy. I guess this because his head was almost ripped off, and dangling from the smallest piece of neck that you can imagine. This must have been why we didn't hear his screams. It looked like he died quickly. I looked in both directions, but I couldn't get enough range from the small window to get a glimpse of anything that could have potentially caused that much damage. Trying to hold in the vomit myself and battling with the giant knot of fear building in my stomach, I sprung into action. I was running on pure adrenaline, but I truly believe it's the only thing that saved our lives that night. I shouted at the girls to start barricading the door. Anything that could decapitate or rip a person's bones to pieces like that could get through a prison lock. The sound that it made was inhuman or even earthly. We needed every resource we had. We pushed all 3 heavy metal bunks across the doorway, and we tried to come up with what was next. We didn't know if the barricade would keep us safe, but it would hopefully buy us some time. "We're all gonna die," Brianna kept repeating. She was in such a state of shock that it appeared calm, but I knew that it wasn't. "No, we aren't. We're going to get out and get help. This is minimum juvenile security. If we can smash the windows and then get out, the worst thing that'll happen will be the guards catching us, so we can alert them and get help." There was desperation in my voice, but I didn't want to die. I was desperate. We had to try. I grabbed a ladder from one of the bunks. It was old and wooden, but thick and strong. With as much power as I could, I smashed it against the thick glass pane. It barely even cracked, let alone shattered. It took a second too long to occur to me that it would be reinforced glass. This may have been a mini prison, but when you have angry teenage females like George, you probably need it. As the realization struck me, so did the noise, the deafening noise again. I looked through the gaps in the metal bunks to the window, and I locked eyes with it for the first time. The creature that was going to haunt my dreams every night from that moment. It was human-like, of average height and build, so average that it was like a mannequin, genderless and unreal. Its skin looked like skin does when it's been covered in PVA glue in a schoolcraft lesson for the fun of peeling it off. Except there was nothing fun about this creature's peeling skin. It was somewhere between a shedding lizard and an old painting. Its complexion was so gray that it was almost khaki, and in complete juxtaposition to its exceptionally average build. It had the longest fingers that I had ever seen. They almost doubled the length of its arms, with sharp, jagged-looking nails. Of all the grotesque features I observed by far, the worst were its eyes. They had almost no white to them. The iris was much larger than a human's, leaving a ring of yellowing white around it. The iris itself couldn't be distinguished from the pupil. They were all black. As I stared through those metal gaps, all I could see was the shine of the yellow ring highlighting those big, black voids staring back at me. We must have maintained eye contact for at least a minute, and before it screamed again, creating the awful scraping noise with its wide-open mouth. It started to furiously bang on the door. Cleo screamed and covered her eyes, backing herself as far into the corner as she possibly could. The bed shook and the door itself opened up slightly, sending splinters flying into the room. The creature's long, thin fingers fit through the split wood in the door and into the room. The barricade held for a while, but the more furiously it banged on the door, the more of a gap was made. It was strong enough to shunt the large metal frames across the room from the outside. This didn't give me much hope for any of our lives. "What the hell is that thing?" Jessie screamed. "It's some sort of demon. We're all gonna die." And Brianna continued, slowly gaining some real emotion back in her voice. In the corner, Amber, covered in her own sick, was breathing heavily, sweat pouring down her face, having a full-blown panic attack as the creature hammered on the door one final time. This time was enough for it to get in. Immediately, Amber sprung up and grabbed Cleo, pushing her into the path of the flaky, maybe demon, monster thing. I really didn't like Amber, but that didn't mean I wanted her to die. It all happened so fast that there was nothing that I could do. I watched as the creature moved towards Cleo, and waited to watch the only person I felt safe would die. But it bypassed Cleo, using its long fingers to push her out of its path towards Amber. When it reached her, it jabbed a sharp fingernail into her throat and pulled across to slit it. Blood rained across the whole room. All of us just looked on in shock. Brianna screamed and clutched Jesse as they ran towards the monster at the ladder that I had used to hit the window. Before they could even start to approach it, it reached out with both hands and it bent its long fingers across them in various unnatural ways. With one almighty squeeze, I heard that crunching sound again. This time, almost twice as loud as I watched the bone splinter, almost as much as the door had. As Brianna and Jesse's crumpled like leaf corpses hit the floor, I accepted that I was going to die very soon. I was a poorly educated 15-year-old girl, and I had no ideas left in my young mind. I had always been a little mouthy, but I knew I had no physical chance of standing up to the beast, and so I didn't fight. I begged. I begged the creature to let Cleo live. Kill me if it had to, but to let her go. She deserved to live. She had so much to live for. I could not bear to watch her die. I didn't expect the creature to even understand me, but it did. It shocked me even further when it answered. Stop talking. I have lived for centuries, little girl. I feed off the anger, misery, self-pity, and selfish nature of the human race. I travel to war zones, prisons, and thousands of other places where these feelings fester. You expect me to take pity on you. Your childish friendship means nothing to me, but it also doesn't provide me with anything. I don't like the taste of good intentions. I only kill bad things, and I can't sense any true bad in either of you. Your selfless act has saved you today, but I'm always watching. You make one bad mistake in the rest of your life, and you will become my menu for the day. Think of it like an endless prison. At this point, the creature let out a laugh so disgusting and low that it shook the room, and then it sprinted towards the glass pane I had earlier failed to crack and it shattered it into a million pieces. I watched it disappear into the forest behind the facility. Obviously, an incident like that created a huge stir. 6 inmates died, including 2 next door to our room, that must have been killed on the first noise. 2 guards were found dead, and me and Cleo were found injured from all the chaos, and dirty and sprouting about a demon humanoid creature. The men in suits turned up pretty fast, putting a spin on the situation and striking deals with us. Immediate release and wiped criminal record, guaranteed foster home until 18, with one of their professionals and a $20,000 savings account in my name, accessible at age 21, was plenty enough to get me to sign away my right to talk about what had happened. I signed so fast that my hand could barely keep up, and Cleo did the same. The newspapers reported a rogue guard. Officer Turvy had a breakdown due to PTSD from so many years working within the prison system. He had gone on a rampage, killing 6 of his inmates and 1 fellow guard, after disconnecting all the CCTV in the building. I imagine the real tapes sit locked up away, somewhere very safely. I've never disrespected the deal I made with the men in suits, or the deal I made with the creature. I've lived an entirely unremarkable life. I finished school, went to college, and I decided to not go to university so that I could avoid parties, drugs, and potential mistakes that could bring them back. I worked at my job in the restaurant and I went home. I socialized very little and I stayed single, until I met a girlfriend at work and we fell for each other. I've made sure to always be good to her. I haven't seen the creature since. Despite my lack of friends, I still occasionally hear from Cleo, known as Chloe after she decided she wanted to completely erase her past. Chloe only calls when she's struggling. She stayed good like me, but she's found it much harder. She can't function in normal society and has needed lots of counseling. Sometimes just talking to somebody who knows she isn't crazy helps her. It puts her back on the straight and narrow. This time was different though. The reason that I'm breaking my deal with the men in suits and telling this story: when I saw the name pop up on my phone screen 2 days ago, I inhaled sharply as I answered, like I always do, but I was met with sheer panic.
Lola, I messed up. I'm bad. I messed up bad.
She screamed into the phone. I didn't even get the chance to answer before I heard it. That same ear-piercing scrape. 9 years after I had last heard it. And the screaming, I did everything I could to prevent all those years ago. The screams were followed by a heavy silence, and then one hideous sentence. I'm always watching. Be good. I don't know what to do now. My best friend is almost definitely dead. It's only a matter of time before they find her body. Someone had to know that she lived. There's no hope for me anymore. Worst of all, I can feel those yellow-rimmed voids watching me. Always.